This presentation is intended to help workers whose jobs require a proper grasp of the basic facts of space life. Except for graphics, the scenes depicting crew adaptation and working effectiveness are from spaceflight film and videotape records. All space missions have one thing in common: the pervasive influence of zero gravity on astronauts and their equipment. Our objective is to illustrate the effects of zero gravity, or weightlessness, on humans living and working in space.
Although the human body is marvelously adaptable, the weightless environment of space is a new challenge. Physiological changes occur, ranging from subtle to conspicuous. These changes, which may affect crew members' work performance and efficiency, need to be fully understood by planners and engineers. One of the most obvious changes is in posture. Space-neutral body posture is a simian-like crouch, resulting in a decrease in effective body height, a lowered sight line, and a shift of body center of mass. This assumed posture is an important consideration when designing vehicles, equipment, and workstations. Of particular concern are body restraints at workstations and handholds or handrails along travel routes.
At the left, a person with normal Earth posture faces a 1G workstation. At the right, the same person and the same workstation are poorly matched. Size variation among crew members, the lowered head angle, straight spine, tip-toe foot angle, floating arms, and arched shoulders may need to be considered in workstation design. In SkyLab's foot restraints, an astronaut exhibits the high shoulder stance typical of zero-G posture during a routine viewing task. And here a crew member exhibits the zero-G posture in profile.
Floating arms feel awkward at times. Between manual tasks, this crewman folds his arms, a common posture when not physically active.
The seat and the restraint harness for this ergometer were removed because exercise posture and force balancing requirements were different in space than had been expected.
Pedaling forces the crew member's head toward the ceiling. An improvised head pad worked better than the harness designed to hold the body seated.
Donning old-style spacesuits was a chore because in weightlessness, bending forward at the hips takes more effort. One crewman is able to duck his head enough to pull his suit on, but the other crewman cannot get his head low enough to enter the bulky suit. There is no gravity pull on the upper torso when trying to bend forward. With a little help from a friend, he gets into the spacesuit. Adaptation to weightlessness is not without physiological concerns. About half the U.S. astronauts experience space motion sickness. Crew members have served as test subjects to study this problem. At present, there is no sure method to prevent the problem or even to predict who will be susceptible. But NASA continues to study this problem using a number of techniques. Typically, nausea gradually leads to vomiting episodes. In some instances, without warning, sudden projectile vomiting occurs. Fortunately, this sickness is a problem in only the first 3 days of spaceflight, and most persons adapt even sooner. After adaptation, crew members are virtually immune to motion sickness.
While a person is standing erect in a 1G environment, gravity forces blood and body fluids toward the feet. Natural muscular tension in the legs tends to pump body fluids toward the upper body. After moving from 1G to 0G, the gravity force is absent, but the muscular tension force remains, continuing to exert a force which moves fluids toward the head. This effect is called the fluid shift. A graphic example of the physical change resulting from the fluid shift is astronaut Jack Lausma's face before and during flight. Eyes become bloodshot and the face swells as fluid is forced to his head. The swelling or edema decreases somewhat after 3 days, but is noticeable during the entire period of weight.
Demonstrations during flight show not only ease of motion in zero gravity, but also the physical irrelevance of orientation up and down and side to side. Movement in any direction requires little effort. Even a beginner can perform a spectacular routine without the use of a trick camera. Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, eat your hearts out.
Motion that might be disorienting or impossible on Earth presents no problem in space. Once adapted to weightlessness, rapid head movement may be made without risk of nausea, but the sensation of tumbling is as strong or stronger than on Earth. Think of the fun space children will have. On your mark, get set, go! It is during work assignments and experiments that the advantage or disadvantage of weightlessness becomes evident. Hand and arm movements require little effort. Earth-heavy equipment may be handled with ease. This unscheduled maintenance on shuttle was accomplished without benefit of good body restraints. The problem becomes obvious as he applies force. Proper restraints for personnel and equipment are essential when applying torque with a tool, because without restraints, attempting to use a twist force could cause rotation of the crewman or the equipment involved.
Note the wide variation in lighting in the work area. Inadequate lighting and extreme contrast and glare are common problems. Near vision may be affected by zero-G. Farsighted crew members over 40 may notice an increased dependence on eyeglasses, particularly in reading text and small instruments. This condition is aggravated by poor lighting conditions.
Earth features clearly visible from space and agricultural areas. Russian cosmonauts report improved vision after an extended time in space, a phenomenon called second sight or space sight that is being investigated. Although some cosmonauts have indicated degraded depth perception during docking operations, U.S. astronauts have not commented on this to a great degree. This doesn't appear to be a problem in eye-brain performance as much as the result of the viewing of objects in the empty visual setting of space.
Entering a compartment in an unusual or unaccustomed body attitude can cause the surroundings to look strange or unfamiliar. As soon as the crew member maneuvers to the customary attitude, the entire scene looks familiar once again. To prevent this confusion, all control and display panels should be oriented to the established reference frame for each work area.
Mealtime points up some interesting aspects of life in space.
Floor grid foot restraints hold the crewmen firmly at their food trays and permit free upper body movement.
This crewman, already in space for 2 months, still tends to correct for gravity drop.
Food on SkyLab was in serving trays, similar to those used on commercial airplanes.
Restaurant-type squeeze containers apply the thicker condiments.
A salt shaker does not work, but food can be salted by squirting salt water from a special syringe. Closed squeeze containers were used for flavored beverages, and water was squirted directly into the mouth using a pressurized dispenser.
A typical drink dispenser, which one pinches toward the nozzle, squeezes liquid into the mouth. However, open containers cannot fully contain water and beverages.
Containers on SkyLab were designed to fit recesses in the trays, and conventional tableware was used. Surface tension works well up to a point, but once the tension bond is broken, the food will float free.
Now that's what you call rare roast beef. Surface tension bonding tends to hold liquid on the surface of food.
And even prevents ice cream from drifting from its container or off the surface of the spoon. The eating area in SkyLab was quite elaborate for spacecraft of the early 1970s.
Interior designers found that ample space had been provided. The longer time in space justified more amenities. Both hot and cold water dispensers were available for preparing food. Space station will require similar provisions. Note again that because of secure foot restraints, actions such as bending, leaning in any direction, twisting, and reaching were possible without hand or arm force.
Eating facilities on short space flights are more Spartan. Food may be in bags, and together with utensils, attached to legs by Velcro. The shuttle orbiter vehicle is designed for flights of less than 2 weeks duration, so creature comforts are not emphasized.
Since in space there is no gravity to work against, physical fatigue is reduced, but there are work schedule and task performance stresses that cause operator fatigue. Regular rest and scheduled sleep are important. On SkyLab, sleep patterns were monitored by means of a special cap. The purpose of the experiment was to determine whether or not sleep patterns are different in zero gravity. Slight differences from Earth sleep patterns were noticed.
On SkyLab, sleeping bags were attached to a tubular metal frame in each crew member's separate sleep compartment. On Space Shuttle, with more crew and less space, sleeping bags are much closer together. Crew members and their sleeping bags are restrained by adjustable belts. Arm position varies among astronauts and is simply a matter of which position feels most comfortable.
In zero gravity, regular exercise is essential. Orientation of the body is of no concern when using exercise equipment, but it is important to provide body restraints designed for each exercise. Prolonged exposure to weightlessness leads to progressive atrophy of leg muscles and an overall decrease in muscular capability. This deterioration cannot be averted, but it can be minimized by a regular program of exercise. Incidentally, heavy exercise too soon after a meal causes belching and regurgitation. The treadmill, the ergometer, and various spring devices are effective methods of exercise. Frequently, a loose item drifts about the space vehicle, but rarely causes physical injury, bruising, or even a sense of heavy contact when occasionally one brushes or bumps against such an object.
Normally, the crew took sponge baths following exercise. However, SkyLab featured a zero-G shower. The shower nozzle and vacuum attachment were used in sequence to apply and remove water. When latched, the circular shower curtain provided a total enclosure to prevent water spills.
Personal hygiene practices such as washing hands and face, brushing teeth, and grooming hair differ only slightly from normal 1G technique. However, loose hair, fingernail clippings, dead skin flakes, and food scraps could drift freely. Carried by normal air circulation, they eventually collect on the intake filter screens of the air circulation system. This 3-day assortment of SkyLab debris is being vacuumed as a part of routine housekeeping. Note how the crewman eventually wraps his legs around the flexible air duct to hold himself in position. Loose equipment and tools may float into spaces that are out of view and may be lost indefinitely. Eventually, some may be dislodged by airflow and reappear, drifting through a compartment moving toward an air intake screen. Housekeeping chores such as taking out the garbage are a bit more involved in space. On SkyLab, trash was placed in a special airlock, sealed in, and transferred to a holding tank.
In space, successful housekeeping requires meticulous care in design and scrupulous crew discipline.
In long-life vehicles, the crew must be provided a well-thought-out stowage plan and an inventory management system.
Medical examining and monitoring become increasingly important as missions in space are lengthened. On long-term space missions, some crew members will have training in paramedic skills when the crew does not include a physician. It can't be emphasized enough that space vehicle designers and engineers must be aware of the importance of body restraints. Foot loops are an effective solution in many instances. Sometimes all you need is something to hold on to.
On SkyLab, many workstations employed a triangular grid floor for foot restraint. Shoes had a mating triangle on the sole, which locked into the open grid with a simple foot rotation.
Body movement required to move this piece of equipment weighing 150 Earth pounds is no problem when good restraints are available. Without restraints, jobs requiring the use of hands, arms, and tools may be difficult to execute and take longer than planned. In a make-do situation, the worker restrains the equipment between his legs.
Before removing an intercom box, this SkyLab crewman tapes tools to the wall to prevent their drifting away. Power tools are currently being used very effectively when the task involves the removal or installation of many fasteners.
In addition to designed body restraints, there are many ways to prevent unwanted body movement. Holding onto a fixed object, wedging a knee against a console, wrapping a leg around equipment. They all work, and astronauts become adept at finding a way to stay in a fixed position.
Managing paper can be an irritation when long rolls or loose pages are involved. They tend to float free, curl, and become a nuisance. Though most data presentation on space station will be electronic, there will be instances when hard copy, a checklist, or a manual will be used.
This change in a checklist required transparent tape and scissors, all restrained one way or another, including clenched teeth. Use of a clipboard is effective and provides a hand rest for writing. Notice the use of the elbows to keep himself in place.
Manual dexterity is not adversely affected by weightlessness while performing tasks inside spacecraft. A Swiss Army knife, in addition to standard tools, is used to accomplish this repair work. Tools must be laid out methodically and properly restrained near the work. Again, this retention is improvised. A portable general-purpose tool organizer and holder should be provided for space station. Physiologically, body position and orientation during work assignments are of no consequence. In a contingency, a crewman will use any handy flat area as a work surface, such as the top of a fan housing. Even an air intake filter screen is usable as a makeshift work surface. Although airflow into the screen is low, objects will cling to it. In one instance, airflow was used to hold small parts during a camera repair.
It's obvious that equipment and tools can drift away if not properly restrained. This is especially true of small, loose parts. It's easy to send them flying with the slightest touch, shove, or sneeze.
Visual reference frame relative to a panel with oriented alphanumerics or graphics is important. Effective design must consider the head attitude or eye-plane relationship. It is difficult to work in a visually inverted attitude relative to the workstation architecture. This panel design is excellent, but panels nearby are oriented differently and are hard to interpret from the work position. It is difficult to read alphanumerics and graphics displays from an oblique angle. Integrated workstation and work area layouts demand care in design.
This well-designed workstation in SpaceLab shows well-organized equipment and good provision for retention for an experiment. A window is frequently used as a workstation, often by several crew members simultaneously. The window and adjacent area should accommodate at least 2 persons, along with their viewing and data equipment.
Loose wires can aggravate a crowding problem. Long hair can get caught or tangled in equipment.
Note how easy it is to manipulate this suited crew member. Again, the key is having good foot restraints. Though earth-heavy objects are easy to move in space, doors and hatches may not be. It took real effort on this standard airlock hatch to break loose the stuck pressure seal.
While the crewman is having no trouble wrestling the heavy equipment, he has only one free hand and the checklist is difficult to manage and keep open at the right place.
Space station designers and engineers should recognize that in space, papers, checklists, wires, and all other poorly restrained items become severe annoyances.
Some good examples of wire clutter in the shuttle system. Cable and hose management caused confusion during this test of the Astronaut maneuvering unit on SkyLab.
Moving from the orbiter to SpaceLab requires little effort when convenient, effective handholds are available to start, stay on course, stop, and maintain position. In SkyLab, movement through the airlock compartment was accomplished using a head-first swimming attitude, stopped by grabbing the work table, and stabilized by firmly engaging foot restraints. Body translation or movement in a space vehicle can be accomplished in a number of ways: standing erect, head first, or with a crawling action. Any of these is effective, but note the almost exclusive use of the hands and arms to control motion. The method used depends on the person, the distance to be traveled, and whatever is safely available to grasp or grab. During such a maneuver, one needs to take care to avoid unintentional operation of switches and controls.
There's no boarding house on Earth that would approve this method of getting from one side of the dining table to the other. In zero gravity, it's not that unusual. However, the crewman returns to his place in a more conventional manner with a more erect attitude relative to the floor.
In Space Shuttle, this astronaut has an architectural orientation with her feet toward the floor and maintains that attitude while moving into the commander's seat.
Life is not all seriousness in space. When you're concerned only with moving through a compartment, being diverted by a game of catch, you'll grab at anything that's handy to control your motion, a fact that should be recognized when designing guards and protective devices for controls and other equipment. Then there are the experiments to find new and different and perhaps more effective methods to move about. Since swim fins work in water, how about here? In truth, you don't need any special devices to get wherever you want to go in a space vehicle. A quick tug or shove and you're on your way.
It may not be an effort to move yourself from place to place, but what about equipment, especially large earth-heavy instruments? The crewmen have no problem hauling large objects and don't even give conscious consideration to center of mass. It's easy to transfer equipment as long as there is ample room and there are plenty of handholds and restraints.
An extravehicular activity, or EVA, also called spacewalk, means doing work outside the spacecraft. The bulky suit makes movement awkward, but a trained astronaut has little difficulty moving along a properly designed path. However, limb mobility and manual dexterity are greatly restricted, and planning for EVA jobs requires meticulous care. Making provision for the proper equipment, tools, and restraints requires careful analysis of each and every task. Complex tasks require elaborate pre-flight training in water tanks. Foot and hand restraints are essential. During the early Gemini flights, Americans first walked in space and learned immediately that just installing foot restraints isn't sufficient. In addition, they must be positioned so it's possible to reach the work. The crewman detaches himself from the foot restraints to better reach the work area, but must use one hand to hold himself in position. Without well-designed, properly positioned body restraints, an astronaut is ineffective when trying to accomplish work assignment during an EVA.
The manipulator foot restraint, MFR, used by shuttle astronauts can be positioned by the remote manipulator system, referred to as the robot arm. It is an effective solution to mobility and restraint problems. However, the RMS is not installed for all shuttle flights. Here, shuttle astronauts use a more basic system. A cable serves as a sliding attachment to tether their suits. The spacesuit used by shuttle astronauts does not require an umbilical or hose attachment to the spacecraft, as did the suits in earlier space programs. Provision must be made to attach or restrain equipment and tools. If this has not been done, hardware items could be lost, as was a thermal glove and a checklist.
The shuttle foot restraint is grabbed just in time. The lesson is clear. The exterior of long-life space vehicles must include generous provision for personnel tether and equipment attachment points.
Transporting equipment on EVAs may be done many ways. An Apollo astronaut demonstrates an early method of moving with the film magazine awkwardly tethered to his wrist.
In a more controlled manner, using a mechanical system such as this extendable boom, another astronaut delivers and recovers film magazines for the solar telescopes. The magazines weigh 75 Earth pounds, about 30 kilograms. The boom, of S-shaped cross-section made of thin steel, extends and rewinds on a spool. Even though the boom was very effective, the astronauts also accomplished this task using a closed-loop pull-around cable system called a Brooklyn clothesline.
It is sometimes difficult for a designer or an engineer to keep in mind how easy it is to move large Earth-heavy objects in weightlessness. There is a limit, of course, but the astronaut is able to move a large satellite weighing about 1,200 Earth pounds. When installed on the shuttle, the remote manipulator system can be used to transfer hardware, move satellites to or from the payload bay, and retrieve satellites from space for an in-orbit repair or the return of the satellite to Earth.
The astronaut's suit, called an EMU, extravehicular mobility unit, provides self-contained life support systems, eliminating the requirement for a suit-to-spacecraft supply line or umbilical. When the suited astronaut attaches the EMU to the MMU, manned maneuvering unit, the combination becomes a self-contained spacecraft used to capture a malfunctioning satellite. The attitude control system of the MMU is used to stop the rotation of the satellite. Once stabilized and positioned in or near the payload bay, the satellite may be inspected and either repaired and returned to orbit or moved to the payload bay and returned to Earth.
Often, questions arise concerning the illumination of exterior areas of a spacecraft not reached by direct sunlight. One might expect the side away from the sun to be dark, but light reflected from the Earth, or Earthshine, provides ample illumination. As the sun sets, the external EVA lights are turned on to provide area lighting. True, there is no light scattering or diffusion in the vacuum of space, but there are cross-reflections from the spacecraft surfaces and from the suit.
Astronauts have worked effectively in a wide variety of lighting conditions, but ample artificial illumination is required for EVA work when the spacecraft is on the night side of the Earth. For space stations, lighting should be provided for all exterior areas of the vehicle. One of the worst lighting situations is encountered when facing the direct glare of the sun. The objective of this presentation has been to illustrate the effects of the zero-G, or weightless environment, on crew members and their performance, and on the functioning of equipment. The most important design and planning issues related to crew members' work efficiency include proper consideration for space-neutral body posture, generous provision of body and equipment restraints at appropriate locations, work area architecture and panel design that provide efficient physical and visual access, and a layout that employs a single reference frame for all panels within each work area. The ultimate goal is to increase designers' and engineers' awareness of factors relevant to their work in support of space flight endeavors.